And welcome to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. I'm Jeremy Yohe, Alta's Vice President of Communications. Thank you for joining us today. I'm hearing it's busy out there, so definitely thankful for you to spend, a little time with us to learn about best practices. As our experts are going to break down some of the top challenges companies have identified in implementation. Including the information security requirements, fraud prevention, vendor management, and other operational processes. Whether your company is just beginning this journey, refining your existing program, hopefully the session will provide some actionable insights to help move you along the compliance journey. We're also going to provide a little sneak peek on some updates to upcoming best practices updates, as well as some additional training Alta will be offering later this year. Before starting, get back to slide. There we go. Have a few housekeeping items to review. A copy of today's presentation can be downloaded in the handout section. You'll also get an email tomorrow with a link to download a copy of the presentation and also access a recording of the today's presentation. If anytime during the webinar you have a question, submit them in the Q&A box. We can hold some time at the end of the presentation for questions. I need to thank Old Republic for sponsoring today's webinar, and we have a short video from Old Republic.
The power of we. We value our agents. We focus on building relationships that last. We provide local underwriting support, responsive, experienced, and close to home. We pick up the phone, show up when it matters, and we're always ready to answer your questions. We share our expertise to solve the everyday and the extraordinary. We celebrate your wins and support your growth. We partner with our agents to help you deliver exceptional service to your clients. We are Old Republic Title. We are agency driven. Are you ready? Work with an underwriter who puts you first.
All right, thank you, Old Republic. And now we'll introduce today's speakers. Joining us, we have Craig Haskins. Craig is a member of Alta's Board of Governors, as well as Vice Chair of Alta's Best Practices Executive Committee and the Best Practices Work Group. Also joining us today is Sherry Hippenbecker. Sherry is General Counsel for Knightberry Title. She is a member of Alta's Best Practices Executive Committee and the Work Group as well. And with that, I will turn the webinar over to the two of you.
All right, thank you. All right. That's kind of snazzy commercial from Old Republic. It's not your typical title, not your typical title video we've seen. That was pretty cool. Thank you, Old Republic, for hosting us, and thank you for the thousands of you who have dialed in for this in a very busy time of the year. We appreciate that. We've got some spoiler stuff we're going to get to at the end, so try to hang in there. And Jeremy just disappeared, which is fine. I get to look at Sherry. Sherry works down the hallway for me, so I get to see Sherry every day. And it's a webinar where I just get to look at a video of you. So this is going to be fun. I'm Craig Haskins, obviously. I am on the Alta Board of Governors and President-elect, which is kind of fun. Like if I don't screw this up in October, I get to be the president of Alta, which is something, I think. I'm an agent guy, so we're a title agency, primarily based in Wisconsin, Minnesota, an office in Michigan, and then a handful of offices down in the Sunshine State. So happy to have you all joining us for best practices. And lastly, why am I talking about this? And that's because I was one of the OGs, one of the original people, one of the original 8 agents that wrote best practices back in like 11 and 12 and launched in 13 or something like that. And with me today is our general counsel, Sherry.
Yeah, and I was part of that 2011, 2012. Both Craig and I have been with Knightberry for eons. I have been 19 and a half years. Craig, you're about 25?
30 in October.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
And so when we both joined the company, best practices was just nothing. In fact, you joined the company when there was, 20 people or something like that? I joined when there was about 80 people. So that was in the year 2007. And then we have the downturn in the economy, and pretty much right after that, And then we have the change in the regulations that pushes best practices in 2011, 20, and 12. So we've kind of grown up with this company that now is in excess of 400 people. And Craig was part of Best Practice Executive Committee when it started. He and I would chit chat periodically, and he would chat with others in our offices about how to keep money safe and information safe. We never had questions about cyber security, by the way, in 2011, 2012. And so we've been talking since then about how we can keep our company solid, how we can keep our customers solid, keep money safe. And gratefully, we've been able to be part of that evolution in the whole title world. It's been pretty fun.
Thinking back, nobody asked, and nobody knew that all of the data from Knightberry was formed in 1854. None of the data of our company, nobody knew that the very entryest level person at Knightberry was the receptionist at our Racine, Wisconsin office. And underneath her was our server with all of the data of everyone involved. And her job every night was to take the tape home in case the building burned. We have a backup of everything in her purse on her way home. That was our entire company. No one ever asked. No one cared. Now they do. And now we have best practices. We had practices back then, and now they're better. Let's go to the webinar objectives.
So I know we don't have a ton of people here, but thanks for joining us. You probably joined because you're like, yeah, I have problems implementing best practices. It keeps changing, evolving. All these new risks come into play. And we want to show you the results of a survey that was put out about that you're not alone. If you have not fully implemented Alta Best Practices 4.2, which was released in August of 2025, you are not alone. So we're going to give you the survey, what other people have said it's difficult about best practices. And then why it's important to have these things implemented, why Knightberry, we do this for our own company. And I know lots of other companies do. Why? Because we want to be a good company. We want to keep information safe. We want to keep money safe. Heck, we want to be able to be here, maybe not for the next 30 years or 19 years, Craig, but you and I got another 10 plus years in this business. And then we're going to review some changes that the Best Practices Executive Committee and Working Group has approved. We're going to go to Alta Best Practices 4.3? No, 5.0. That's going to probably come out. It's in front of the Alta Board of Governors right now. Craig, do you think that would be approved, maybe?
Yeah, typically they are. I mean, we beat the heck out of all these ideas. So the agents and underwriters throughout the country submit ideas to us of how we can all be better. And of course, lenders and lawyers and property developers and builders and realtors talk about how we can be better. And our buyers and sellers have an idea of how we can be better. And we take all that into consideration, and we edit the best practices every year to best reflect what's out there. So, yeah. So you kind of said it a little bit ago, and the last bullet there, upcoming best practice training is a spoiler. You might want to wait till the end here. We've got something really neat we're going to try to get done this year. And it's not just those of you who had a hard time with the last version of best practices, which has to do with identity fraud, deed theft. But that was difficult, but we're going to kind of go through all of it. And we're going to key on that latest change here at the end. And then we're going to have a brand new set of best practices, or kind of a good good editable version of best practices that we'll talk about at the end. So let's go to the next slide, and let's talk about why best practice is important. I'm going to read it because I think this is a great sentence. By following best practices and identifying and remediating any deficiencies, agents take active steps to protect all parties and processes involved in the real estate settlement. So what I always think about is we're protecting money that's not ours. We're holding it. It's not ours. Maybe a little tiny piece of it is ours, a premium or closing fee, but the money, not ours. We're holding it, protect it. And all that private information, that non-public private information that we have in all of our files, it's not ours, protect it. So the stakeholders are on your screen here, consumers. It's their money usually, and it's their data that we have. We have to protect it. We don't have to protect it just until a closing Friday. We have to protect it for a long time, probably ever. If you're going to store social security numbers and private information and bank accounts, you got to keep it safe forever. Banks, they are also a stakeholder in why best practices is important, because it's on them. If they pick you as the closer and you screw something up, it's on the banks. Did they pick the right vendor? By the way, at some point today, I hope I remember to tell you, You should be taking your best practices and everything you do every year. Our company does it every year, and brag to the banks of what you're doing. And with the hint saying, I don't know if the guy down the street's doing this, but here's all the stuff that we're doing. And banks love that stuff. Here's what we're doing to protect you as a bank, credit union, mortgage company, to make sure you're compliant with your regulations, because it's on them if they pick a goofball title agency who loses all the data and money. Title insurers, of course, we all want to keep our underwriters happy. We want to make sure that their underwriting standards are being met and we're doing everything properly. Typically, a lot of that is on best practice 5. How fast do you issue your policies? How fast do you report your premiums? How fast do you pay them the money that they owe on their side of the split? Real estate professionals, we want to make brokers and agents happy with us for providing a great, comfortable closing, quick turn time, handling things professionally. And the hidden gem, this should be first, by the way, is your business, a title agent's business. This is my hidden gem. Protecting your operations and your reputation is important. I think best practice is more about how we can make ourselves better in light of all the other things I talked about. I love best practices because I forget to brag about how everything in best practices we're implementing here in our company. So let's give a quick, Sherry, let's go back and forth on the next slide. Let's just real briefly remind people, because Sherry and I live, eat, breathe, sleep best practices. So let's remind everyone what the 7 pillars are, and then touch on those very briefly and get to the next one after that.
Sure. There are 7 pillars. Those 7 pillars were created as part of the 2011-2012 when best practice was implemented. It was really in response to the CFPB saying, guess what, banks, you're not going to be able to hire title and settlement people unless they can prove that they have certain best practices in place. And amazingly, the best practices pillars mirrored the language that came from the CFPB. Right?
Let me take the easy one.
Okay.
Pillar 1, licensing. Are you licensed? Yeah. Write it down. Cool. Next, Sherry, what's 2?
All right. Pillar 2, escrow operations. How much money do we have rolling through our escrow accounts on an annual basis at Knightberry?
I'm not telling you that.
No, I'm not either, but it's more than what I have personally. And we have to make sure that that money is safe, that we have processes in place. We have payee, positive payee. We have escrow reconciliation on a normal basis. We have not one, but at least 2 people that are going to look at every wire transfer. We have all these checks and balances so that that couple dollars that goes through our escrow account that's not ours is safe. And we're working with those banks that have the protocols in place to keep money safe.
So I think other than getting licensed on number 1, could be difficult, but there's a way, you're probably all fine with that. And that's just documenting it. Pillar 2 that Sherry just talked about, escrow stuff, that's hard. It's a very difficult. The biggest threats in the industry are happening in pillar 2 right now, and 3. 3 is IT stuff. Do you have a written information security plan that talks about how you keep data safe? What's your password rules? How are you handling wire fraud? So that's 3. I would argue 2 and 3, difficult. For sure, those are the ones, if you're on this call, you're probably saying, yeah, I could use some help on 2 and 3. Sherry, what about 4?
Also include, hey, don't just put things in place, but think about what if something bad happens and what are your steps that you're going to take? Because if something bad happens, are you going to be able to sit back and go, okay, let me go back to my WISP, let me figure out, and your heart is palpitating. If you have those steps laid out, you can calmly walk through those steps and hopefully recover if money is lost or address issues if it comes to a cyber incident. So that's some critical components of 2 and 3.
Take 4 too, Sherry. That's your baby.
It's the closing. I mean, as part of our consumers in the banks, you want to make sure that you have a great closing process. And so we walk through in pillar 4. What is the closing? How can you keep documents safe? That's where the new identity fraud prevention program that we'll be talking about in a few moments exists. That's to stop against impersonation frauds. And hint, best practices 5 might also have the consumer complaint. Oh, yes, it will have the consumer complaint information from pillar 7 that you'll talk about in a few moments, Craig, is going to be incorporated into pillar 4. Because, Craig, if a complaint comes in about a closing or a file, usually who is that complaint from?
That's a good one. Usually it's from the realtor or the lender on behalf of the consumer.
And it's on behalf of the consumer. That's why we decided to couch the consumer complaint issue, because it's a consumer, in pillar 4, which is the closing experience.
Yeah, I mean, not to skip 5 and 6, but 7 was, a response to the lenders who said, hey, we have this new Dodd-Frank TRID rule. We've got to keep track of complaints and log them. So title companies, anytime someone complains about your servers, please write it down in a log and let's talk about it. So that was 7. Sherry's got the spoiler alert in full effect. We're going to move pillar 7, the complaint log, under 4, which is pillar 4, which is the closing process. So if there's a complaint from a consumer, that belongs more in paragraph 4. We'll talk about that in a little bit. 5, pillar 5, title policy production, premium remittances. How fast do you issue policies? Is there a lag? I know underwriters love to harp on agents lag, and agents, if you're lagged out too long, it's probably not best practices. It's probably like good practices or okay or substandard practices. So there is some requirement in there on how fast you have to issue your policies, and you get pressure from your customers and your banks and your credit unions about getting their policies quicker. So that's all covered in 5. 6 is not my expertise.
6 is one of the shortest ones. Pillar 1 and pillar 6 are the short. They're like half a page each. Pillar 1 says get licensed. Pillar 6 says get insurance. But it's interesting about insurance, and when the spoiler that we're going to talk about, we're going to have some additional training. We're going to have people talk about what is the different type of insurance and coverages that you should have, that your underwriters require you to have, and the why, and what you need to dig into. Do you have the social engineering? Hey, when you started Best Practices in 2011, we did not have cyber insurance. It was not a thing. Knightberry didn't have fidelity coverage, which is a loss of money from employee theft. We don't have director and officer insurance. All of these different insurance, there are things that you should consider depending upon the scale of your business and your exposure. We'll dig into that as well. But yeah, that whole cyber coverage, that didn't exist until a couple of years ago.
We didn't have the cloud. We didn't have servers out in the cloud somewhere. We didn't deal with it then. We didn't have deed theft. We didn't really have sophisticated wire and business email compromises. We didn't have that. So it's evolved. This has evolved over the last 12, 13 years. And it will keep evolving, because what's the thing that you can't turn on the news without hearing anymore? AI. What's the impact of AI on best practices? For those of you who are into AI stuff, spoiler alert, we'll talk about a little of that. So the assessment process on the right there, back in the day, in order to be, a lot of agents ran to third-party assessment companies who would come in and audit and vet your company and give you a certificate for a fee about your standards. Those can still exist, but what we do internally at our company is we do an internal assessment. We take the best practices as written and the procedures that the audit committee makes at Alta, and we compare them against how we run the company. And if we see something insufficient, then we fix it. So we do that internal self-assessment. We do not use a third party. Either way is fine. I would argue that most agents probably want to do an internal assessment. If you're at a state or you have a customer that requires a third party, well, then you'll have to do that. They're all available. And that's sort of what we do. Had a title agent in Washington, D.C. at our advocacy seminar or advocacy lobby week last month say, hey, in order to get a better premium on my E&O and my Fidelity, my insurance coverages, I need to have an Alta best practice process, an audit in place. And we haven't done that because it seems complicated. And I said, well, try the self-assessment and submit it, and it worked. So there's a checkbox, I guess, when you're doing your insurance coverages. Are you best practice compliant? You can feel free to check the yes, at least we do. If you've gone through this process, identified where you need remediation, deficiencies, and made your company better. So I think
that's an important point, and this came out in the survey, that a lot of people didn't understand that the self-assessment is certainly acceptable. Why? Because we're not a regulated industry like the lenders and banks that have their local regulators and the CFPB that come in and will actually do the audits, and they do the assessment. In our world, you might have an underwriter that's going to do an audit of you for title insurance policy production purposes, but you are not, if you're a title agent, you're not an agent of the underwriter for closings. You have some component because you have the CPL, the closing protection letter, that the underwriter will issue to allow you to do the closings and protect the lender, but you are not their agent for closings. So the self-assessment is acceptable because we are not really a regulated industry like the banks are.
I've never given our self-assessment to a lender and they said it's not good enough. And we do hundreds of lenders. All right, next slide. Next slide would be the answer to what are the top 5 challenges based on the survey that we gave to the tens of thousands of people who looked at it, and thank you to those who have responded. The 5 challenges are your nerds sufficient? Number 1, the challenge on, we talked about best practices 2 with escrow, but best practices 3 is covered in the IT and cybersecurity requirements. Are you up to par, and what's the challenge with IT? And we'll get to some of that. So that was one of the number 1 challenges.
Right. Do you have in-house IT people that you subcontract with? Where do you have your servers? Where do you have your backups? What happens about intrusions into your systems? Do you have adequate endpoint detection and response? That's a lot. It's a lot to be involved in if you have 5 different people. And is it inexpensive to have all that in place? Probably storage is not as expensive as it used to be, cloud-based storage, but some of this protections on endpoint detection and response for your actual computers might be a little bit more expensive. And, we can talk about how you can get payment for that, or be able to offset that on your balance sheet. The next is the fraud prevention and identity verification controls. This is the seller impersonation fraud, your vacant land fraud that just hit us like a ton of bricks in the year 2022 and thereafter. And we added in Alta 4.2, best practices 4.2, which came out in August of 2025, the requirements in Pillar 4 regarding having an identity fraud prevention program. It's relatively new. And actually, when Craig and I put together an Alta webinar, I think it was last fall, November, October or something of 2025, at that time, we had a couple hundred people that joined that webinar, and less than 30% at that time had implemented the identity fraud prevention program. So if you haven't done this yet, you're not alone.
It's not too late. It's not too late, but if the extent of your fraud prevention and identity verification is like a bouncer in college, looking at an ID, looking at the person, and that's it, I'm not sure you're going to comply. So I think if it were me and the agency I own, I got to go. We need to do more of that. It's just too easy to get fake IDs. It's too easy to do mail away closings. It's too easy to fake out the identity protections that we should be dealing with. So
if I can throw out one more thing on that, Craig.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 3, 4, and 5 are really some things that the leadership team at your company can work on. They can work on the security measures. They can work on your disaster recovery plan, your WISP. You don't have to involve your day-to-day staff operational people. But number 2, fraud prevention, that's everybody. Identity verification, that's everybody that handles any money documents for a settlement. So it has to be drilled down to staff level, not just the leadership level in your company.
Yeah. And Alta Resources, they've got several vendors that do that for a living, that can implement right into your production system that you use in-house to help you improve that. So you don't have to invent something or create something awfully expensive. It's there, and those vendors will help you out. 4, so managing vendors, notaries, third-party service providers, that's at 4.2, last year's best practices that Sherry mentioned. Disaster recovery plan, this is another one. I'm surprised this is on here. And actually, I'm surprised 4 and 5 are on here, because those are the owner or manager or the leaders of your agency sitting down and writing a disaster recovery. What happens if something bad happens, whether it's a wire fraud, whether it's a tornado, whether you're out of business because of a hurricane or a blizzard, or going through all the natural disasters, an earthquake. Like, what happens if there's a problem? How do you respond? How do you get back up and running, and when? Why that's on here as a challenge is beyond me. So what I did this morning, I went to our friendly AI. Everyone's using them. I can tell because your emails are goofy. We can all tell when you're sending emails through AI, so use your own voice. But I did go to AI for this, and I said, hey, I'm a title insurance agent, and I'm looking at Alta best practices on the American Land Title Association website, and it requires that I create a disaster recovery and business continuity plan. Can you help me? Sure can. Let's talk. Then it started asking me questions like, who are the people who are the leaders in your company that will make the calls? Who is in charge? What happens to the people if they can't get to the office that day? How are you contacting consumers? So they walked me through, and I'd say if you spent a half an hour or an hour with that, you'd probably have one done. So I would look at that if you're having a hard time with disaster recovery. have a hard time no more. Give it a shot. Now write it, don't let them just write it and spit it out, but alter it and edit it. They will prompt you, and then who are you going to call? What if there's an IT fraud? How are you going to get back up and running? They'll walk through all of that with you. When I say they, it's like Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, Grok, all these things. Same with 5. Written Information Security Plan. That's a couple years old now. And if you said to your AI, I need to develop a WISP, accordance with American Land Title Association best practices, help me do that. It's going to say, great. One of the things you have to know is passwords. How hard are your passwords in your office? How often do you change them? What type of password programs do you use? Do you do anything? It'll walk you through that, and we'll write it for you. And then they'll go on to the next thing and the next thing. How do you control a realtor?
Have all of this stuff already done, but it might be here and not written on paper.
Yes.
And thanks to Claude and Grok and ChatGPT, my friend, that you'll be able to get that in a written format, go through that, print it out, have hard copies available, because if your system goes down, you don't want to rely upon a computer that you can't access anymore that has this written information. It's very rare things that actually print out to actual paper. That's something that you may want to consider printing down.
Spoiler alert, again, on the same topic. We are going to do something this year to help do this with you. Okay, so there's a quick spoiler alert. Let's go to the next thing and talk about implementation insights. And Sherry, why don't you handle this slide?
Great, let me take a peek and see what it says. I mean, what are the difficulties? The reality is it takes time. You have to separate yourself from your day-to-day operations to be able to think through these questions that best practices raise for your company, to have your company be safe and secure. Do you have the time to do that? Is it difficult? Thank you, Claude and ChatGPT. It's not nearly as difficult as it used to be. And if you go on to the Alta Best Practices portion of the Alta website, there are actually some guidance and draft documents that you can use. You could feed those directly into Claude and ChatGPT and then start working through the questions that Craig just talked about. Certainly training could be a problem because you may be in one location, you may have staff in another location. How do you get together your staff training to talk about the fraud issues and identity fraud prevention program? For the most part, best practices, most of the pillars can be done by leadership without involvement of your staff. Think about best practices pillar 4, though. That is staff involvement because they're the facing the customers, and they're the ones that are on a day-to-day preventing the fraud, implementing the processes that you're going to train them. Cybersecurity, liability, and integration with vendors, that's a leadership team. Vendors are difficult. Preview to best practices 5.0. Vendors has been talked about in pillars 2, 3, and 4. Now we're making pillar 7 all about vendors. All about vendors. Why? Because the lenders are vetting us because they have a regulator. We have an obligation to vet our vendors. So we're going to give a little bit more insight. And then finally, third-party support for fraud prevention and IT operations. That's what Craig was just talking about, that there are companies out there, there are Alta's best or trusted providers that can help you out to be able to figure out, is this a real person that's signing this deed? Is that the real person that owned that property? Do we have a potential identity fraud issue, impersonation fraud issue?
Yeah, and with the outside vendors, your concern is how, and like Sherry just snuck in there, Alta Best Practices 5.0, which hasn't been approved, but there's been drafted. We are answering the question finally that you all ask is, how do I know the vendor I picked is going to be compliant with best practices? How do I know the kid who comes in to handle upgrades to my server cabinet and runs my internet, kid, company, whoever, how do I know that I'm compliant by picking that vendor? So we've got some guidelines that we're going to release, if approved, sometime this year that give you a step-by-step help in making sure all of those vendors you use are going to keep you in the right harbor, safe harbor with best practices. All right, the next slide, ongoing. Now I'm going to say that we've completed the first task and we've gotten to the final goal. We've got our internal certification. We're operating. We finally did it. It might have taken 13 years, but we finally are happy as an owner, or manager, or leader at our agency that we've created this playbook on best practices and we're happy. Well, now what? So the ongoing things to do after you're certified are critically important. It might feel great to get your best practice certification done and put it on the shelf and say, well, that was fun, but it has to be an ongoing thing. I'm not going to read all the bullets one by one, but they are there for you to understand what some of the things that you have to do going forward. I will point out the second to last one. Once you have your disaster recovery, please don't test it during a disaster. Please have a fake disaster. We do this every October, and we send out a message to all. We have 80 something offices. We send a message to all 80 offices that this week we need you to pretend there's a disaster. Talk to each staff member about this is what we do if something bad happens, and then write down that you did it, send it back in, and then guess what I do? I send all my lenders who care about this an updated disaster recovery thing saying, hey, we tested it this week. Here it is, and this is the result. And lenders love that stuff. Does my biggest competitor down the street do that? No. Do I get more orders? Probably not. But I think I have a better reputation because the lenders are doing this. They don't know that their local title company in Sheboygan, Wisconsin is doing that. Now they do, because I'm bragging and telling them that.
Can I give you one thing on that? Knightberry has actually experienced 2 actual disasters where thankfully the first one, we didn't have a plan in place. The second one we did. The first one was a fire before best practices. The whole thing goes down and we're trying to claim insurance. And the building that we rent goes down. We have renter's insurance, and we try to say, hey, this is type of stuff that we had in the building. We're making up how many chairs and desks and whatnot and computers that gets burnt down. We didn't have pictures of every single office and all of this equipment that we were claiming to be able to get some money back from the insurance company. We implemented that process once best practice goes into place, and then we had a hurricane. Again, everything gets destroyed in the hurricane. The difference is in an offsite location, we had a database showing all of the different items for which we were looking for the personal property insurance. So this is real stuff, and it makes sense, and it is money in your pocket if you have a disaster that takes place, if you've gone through this process.
And as far as the second half, the disaster recovery, the business continuity, during that fire where our office burned down, we've also been involved with hurricanes, blizzards. We have offices in Florida and the Midwest, so we get hurricanes and blizzards. How do you continue your operation? So after that fire, we had to notify all of our customers that your people can't come to the office tomorrow for their closing because there's not an office anymore. What are we doing next? We're closing at the neighboring office. Actually, First American and Chicago's office in Madison, Wisconsin, reached out right away and said, if there's anything we can do, let us know. You want a copier, you need help closings, you need a conference room, awesome. The local title agent, friends of ours there, very helpful. And that's sort of our business continuity. Now, how are we going to be up the next day? Hopefully you have a good reputation. Hopefully you have a good relationship with your competitors or with your local lenders, your banks, your credit unions, your realtors. What if you only have one office and something bad happens and you can't get there? How are you going to continue your operations? Even if it's not the next day.
To our staff, your safety is the first thing. You get out, you take your personal stuff and get out, but the rest of the stuff we'll take care of it because we've thought it through. We're going to keep that business going.
Next slide.
Hey, real quick, Sherry and Craig, a question from Lisa on business continuity. And she asks, is your testing for this more of a tabletop exercise, or do you actually take your systems down?
Oh, it's a good question. I will tell you, we have a redundant system. We pay an absolute fortune to some third parties to prevent downness, but we had a few offices go down this week because the internet in the local town went down. So we have practiced that unannounced, but the normal stuff, grab your laptop, grab the checks on your desk, grab what you can, get out. And if you're going to work from home tomorrow, who's going to cover you? Who's communicating with the buyer and the seller? All of the things that are in our disaster recovery are a simple test. Taking the system down? No, I don't. That's not part of our testing procedures on that. Should it be? I don't know. Maybe it's a good idea. I haven't thought that through, but I don't know.
But we do test the backups. So we don't really take the system down, main system, but we test backup 1 and backup 2. So we know that if this comes down, we've got them in separate locations and they're accessible.
Yeah.
So kind of.
And our office kind of thinks it's fun. Like, hey, remember, the fire alarms in elementary school, everyone got to ran out into the recess field for a half an hour or something. It's kind of that. You grab your stuff, grab your purse, whatever, and get the heck out. Now, if it's a fire, don't get anything, just go. But if you're gonna, if it's a disaster that you see coming, blizzard, hurricane, you get a few days, you get a little more time to plan. Who's going to work from home? What are we doing about Wednesday's closing when there's a foot of snow coming or there's a Category 3 hurricane in the Gulf? Those are the sort of plans you need to think out on the disaster recovery, at least for natural disaster recoveries. Cybercrime, ransomware, different set of testing, and I acknowledge that. That's part of it as well. That's a whole different seminar. We're going to get to that at the end with a little teaser. So where have we been, Sherry? You're going to fly through the best practice journey here.
Let's go to the next slide, actually, because that's going to give us our little journey. We've already talked about it.
Let me talk about the first. I'll tee it up for you then. Number one, old school best practices is because if the lender said, if you want to be doing business with us because of this new Dodd-Frank thing, you have to fulfill certain obligations if you want to stay in the game, title people. So we're like, oh no, we need to stay in the game. Here's best practice. Then it evolved over time. And now it's number two, let's fix our own ops. Let's make our own operations great. Use it as a playbook for your internal, how to make yourself great. And then the pillars of improvement we've talked about since the original to the current, we've really beefed up safety and security. We've really beefed up best practice 4 with the consumer experience in a closing room, ID verification stuff. And we've talked a little bit about operational optimization and technology as some of the new things that have changed over the years. All right, next slide. The last best practice was last summer, and that's Sherry's deal here.
Yeah, this is the seller impersonation fraud. This is the vacant land fraud. The evolution of best practices in the last couple of years has been every year we're going to consider something new to add best practices to risk if there is a new risk that's forthcoming. In the year 2022, 2023, we started seeing the impersonation fraud. We incorporated the identity fraud prevention program in best practices 4.2 in pillar 4. What was it about? Hey, let's identify that there is identity fraud out there, that it is critical for our industry. It is critical for to protect consumers, lenders, and realtors. And let's add that in place. If you go to the next slide, Jeremy, what I want to point out is I'm running through this a little bit quickly, simply because Craig and I went through this before in November of 2025 in the Alta webinar. So you can go ahead and take a peek at that if you want to have a bit of a deeper dive. If you want just a quick overview, the new Pillar 4 requirements basically says control the signing. Don't do those mail away closings that you used to do. Email or mail a deed to somebody who can go find their own notary to sign that deed. Why? Because seller impersonation fraud exists. It's live and kicking. And frankly, we see it once a week as attempts, at least in our company. So we control the signing. We either have sellers come and meet with us in person, or we do a remote online notarization, which has identity fraud built into it, because in order to enter the session, of course, the person that's going to sign has to provide their government issued ID and answer some dynamic knowledge-based authentication questions. Or we're the ones that send the notary out, and we select the notary and send them out to sign with that seller. And we typically also use one of those trusted providers that also Alta has to be able to remotely confirm a person's identity and confirm that they are where they are located, so that we can tie up the driver's license to the person, to the owner of the property, and feel comfortable we've done what we can, and on a sliding scale to say we are not being fooled with a seller impersonation fraud. Craig, you look like you're ready to chat there.
No, I'm just saying, like, this 4.2 is such new stuff. When I first started in this business, it was basically, like I said, the bouncer at the Purple Porpoise Bar in Gainesville, Florida, where I went to school, go Gators. Just looking at whatever you handed the person, they'd look at it and let you in back then. We can't do that. And it's kind of complicated. Jeremy, the next slide is kind of the exact language under 4.2. Again, we're not going to go through all this. There's a great 45-minute seminar. We walk you through each step in 4.2, everything you have to have. Like Sherry said, if you got a deed in the mail, say, hey, I couldn't be at the closing, but I signed with my lawyer and here's the deed. Just taking that and trusting doesn't fly anymore. You have to do some independent verification, because these fraudsters are really good. If you don't believe me, ask your underwriter. Ask your underwriter. Deed fraud is crazy. We even created a whole new endorsement at Alta for this type of coverage. And heck, if you watch Fox News or CNN late at night, you'll see that company I won't name. If you've had your deed stolen, they're stealing your deed right now. For $1 billion, we'll protect you. Well, we have a title insurance coverage for that now. That's how important this is.
So we have that Alta, that's the Alta 49. I think there's a webinar coming up or talking about that Alta 49 endorsement. And also consider the homeowner's policy of title insurance, which does include post-policy protection for the insured for identity fraud and people stealing their home. So it is the that company that you don't want to name late at night.
Doesn't the Alta's homeowners policy sound so amazing? Where's the state with the most, with allegedly the most deed fraud? Florida. They won't allow the Alta homeowners policy just yet. So we don't even get the 49. So there are other things the state of Florida is doing. Some that I was in a call this morning, fascinating stuff. But your state might not allow certain things, and keep that in mind. We try to build these things for everyone. They don't all apply. So apply your state standards as you will. On the next slide.
If I can just focus quickly on this, the identity fraud prevention program, that's the Alta best practices for. You want to 4.2, you want to look at number 3, 4, and 5. Consider if it's a signing professional who's employed by your company, there's one standard. If there's a signing professional that you send out to meet with the seller, there's another standard. But finally, number 5, if you get that deed in the mail, and because it's a signing professional selected by the seller or the buyer or the borrower, quote, treat the document as being at risk for fraud, period. You just have to treat it. Why? Because it's just too, the losses are astronomical in this impersonation fraud. Because if you got a bogus deed, you have a bogus title commitment, you have a bogus title policy, you have a couple $100,000 at risk, depending on the value of the property that was sold. So treat it as risk of fraud. Watch that webinar that we had from last fall.
Awesome. Next slide.
Can I interject? Got another question here specifically about confirming sellers. Maybe a little bit more color on how Nightberry maybe handles sellers in foreign countries. Joanne had that question, and she says they use Closing Lock.
So the answer is, yeah, we use one of those trusted providers. I can't say which one, but we do use a trusted provider that does do validation of government issued IDs from other countries, not just the United States. We do work with our underwriters. We talk with the realtor if it's a sale and talk about their relationship with the party that's trying to sell. Have they met them in person?
Sherry, I'm the realtor. I have never met this person. I don't know this person, but they emailed me in my Yahoo account and told me that I'm going to list their lakefront property. They seem legit. Sorry, couldn't resist.
So it's difficult. We do a layered digging approach to see if we can get to a comfort level. We also will look and say, okay, where are we supposed to send the money? Are we supposed to wire that money internationally? That's a big we're not wiring that money internationally. Do you have a domestic bank account? And somebody says, yeah, I have a domestic bank account. We can still collect their wire transfer instructions using one of those trusted providers that we just talked about. And then what we also do is then we do in the background, we go, okay, that bank account, the person, let's say it's Craig that's selling that property and he's in a different area. I'm going to look at that US bank account and see did Craig open up that bank account just recently, or has it been around for like 20 years and in his name? I just keep building areas to get a comfort level. And has there been times that we go, we think this is fraud? Absolutely. And then when we reach out to the realtor and we say, we think this is fraud, many times they'll say, I agree with you. So we just keep digging until we can feel comfortable. There isn't, I wish there was one rule that we could do. We can't.
I'm just thinking back to the good old days where you would just take that document that came in the mail and record it.
But it has an app to steal. It should be fine.
Wire the check to Asia, wherever. What's the worst that could happen? So different now. These fraudsters are so smart. I love the part where you said, everything looks legit with this person. They even faked out the identity verification. But at the last second, one of the vendors that you mentioned let us know that the bank account was just opened last week. Now you might have passed 10 green flags. That's a stop. That's a why. So there's so many new things, and that's what we try to identify in these best practices 4.0, and or 4.2. Great question, whoever asked that. I couldn't hear the name, but whoever you are, thank you. Next slide, Jeremy. And we're almost finished. We've got 2 slides left, and we'll have questions, and we'll figure it out. One more after that.
This identity verification methods, again, watch that video from before. And there is guidance on identity verification methods, like a 9-page form that's on Alta Best Practices website. Download that as well. And if you want, we have kind of a 1-pager at Nightberry that talks about what we do, what we require our staff for the ID verification, you can email me, you can email Craig. We can get that to you. I have no problem with that. That's just for our staff.
Looking ahead on the next slide, best practices 5.0 doesn't exist. It's in draft. It needs to be approved. It's been through several committees. It's going to go to the Alta board in a couple weeks. If approved, it'll be sent out for your review, comment period. We'll readjust. You'll find a typo. You'll find a misused semicolon. You title people are great. And then it'll become the new 5.0. Now, what's in the 5.0? You heard us talk about it a little bit ago. We're moving the consumer complaint section from Pillar 7 into Pillar 4, which leaves a big hole. What's 7 now? We're going to do a little bit more. We're going to talk about vetting a vendor. We're going to talk about how to analyze a vendor, how you can be safe picking vendor A over vendor B. We're going to talk about cybersecurity readiness, expanded guidance around identity verification that Sherry just talked about. More guidance on ID, by the way, more guidance. This isn't over. Like what we've learned, what we're doing today to stop seller impersonation and vacant land fraud, they're going to be smarter than us in a couple months, and then we'll readjust again. The goal is to stay one step ahead of them. They'll catch us and pass us, and then we'll stay ahead of them again. It's not fun, but unfortunately, that's part of the business we all have decided to get in. Third-party management, that's a big part of Alta 5.0 or best practices 5.0. But Sherry, one thing that what about AI? What is your group, or what is the group working on with artificial intelligence? Can we expect some updates in the 5.0 draft about AI?
Not necessarily 5.0, but 5.1. Okay. So AI is, we usually given the time that it takes to look at the changes, implement the changes, go through the work groups, get it through the board to look at it, to get it for public comment. It usually takes, about a year or so. So I anticipate in 5.1, which would be fall of 2027, maybe we'll have some additional language within best practices itself on AI, but the guidance that we have, which doesn't require Alta board approval, is being updated with AI. In fact, it actually has some references to AI right now.
If your title agency is using artificial intelligence, whether it's a public facing one or one you're building on your own, and it's helping you make underwriting decisions, we got to give you some guidance on that. First of all, obviously talk to your underwriter. But if you're scanning a deed that's in handwriting from the 1800s and asking Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT to type that for you so you don't have to, that sounds like a great use of some AI out there. Obviously, you're going to double check and proof the legal. If you're saying, hey, look at this title commitment and delete the exceptions that I probably don't need on here, maybe you look for some guidance from underwriters. Maybe that'll be part of 5.1 or the things that we need to set as some basic standards for the use of AI in the industry. Obviously, your AI bot can't be licensed in your state to sign policies, so you're still going to need a human to be involved in that, and we'll try to get to that on the future.
And I think some of the main things from AI is considering, especially for your staff, what is non-public information and not feeding into the public AI forum non-public information.
Next page. Thank you, Sherry. All right, looking ahead, this thing we've been teasing.
Finally,
we've been teasing this boot camp, and this is what we're doing. And Sherry, you're going to go into some of this too. We've assembled some amazing leaders for all 7 pillars plus on Alta best practices. We're going to have a boot camp, a series of them, correct, Sherry, where we get the best experts on escrow, the best experts on IT, the best experts on identity fraud. We're going to have a boot camp on each one of those to hold your hand and walk you through what you have to do. So it's more of a boot camp, a workshop thing. And what else can we say about that, Sherry? I know we're still in planning phase on that.
We're in planning phase, but we want it to be released with 5.0. So we're looking for fall of 2026 to have this released. And it's going to be in chunks. For best practices pillar 1, which is licensing, probably a 45-minute session where you're going to be able to watch it at your leisure and go, here's what I need to know. And then best practice 2 and 3, there's a lot of different components. We're going to have mini little sessions, maybe 3 or 4 for best practices pillar 2 and best practices pillar 3, saying, here's the things that you need to consider. Let's go to Claude and let's write our written information security plan. The idea is that you're going to be able to, as your leadership, you're going to be able to sit down at your leisure, at your own timeline, and lay this out so that once you've gone through that boot camp, which I expect is going to be about 12 different sessions or so, we're still working through that, in 45 minutes to an hour, you're going to be able to be best practices compliant. You can do self-assessment. You can tell the world why your company is good and why lenders and realtors and buyers and sellers should work with you.
And like Sherry said, divide and conquer. If you're the escrow person, if you're the person in charge of money and the closing process, but don't have any knowledge on IT, assign someone else on your staff to watch the IT side and to be participating in that. You don't have to do it all yourself. We'll have subject matter experts. We'll have the best auditors from all of our underwriters on to help us figure out the assessment procedures and what you should be doing with each one of these. It'll be a really neat series of boot camps that we're going to do for this. It's going to be a recorded session, so you can watch them at your own pace. If you don't start until January because you're busy until the winter, great. They'll all be there for you. But we're really going to roll up our sleeves. We've got the best people, not just Craig and Sherry talking about Alta best practices. We've got the best people that we've assembled from around the country on each topic to walk you through how you should be handling this. And if you've got a hurdle or a roadblock you're up against with any of the 7 pillars, we're going to solve it for you. So keep an eye out from Alta on when that could happen. Sherry, last words, and then see if Jeremy has any questions.
And it's not going to be just a one and done. The idea is that this gets recorded, and then as changes are made on a 5.1, 5.2, et cetera, and there needs to be some new tweaks, we'll just add it to the boot camp. So the boot camp is going to live on Alta's website and be accessible into the future.
Awesome. All right, Jeremy, that took care of the 5 challenges with our own opinions on certain things and a tease for the boot camp that we're putting together. Are there any other questions, or did we tackle them along the way?
Yeah. Love it. Great conversation. We do have a few questions. I have a few questions, if you want to hang out for like 5 minutes or so, and I won't ask you about the bars in Florida when you were going to school down there or anything.
Sorry about that. I got carried away.
Again, I did put a few links in the chat box. Sherry and Craig mentioned the resources on Alta's websites for the best practices. One of the questions about the vendors, and you all created the vetting a vendor document that has a pretty great resource on questions you should be thinking about when you're out there soliciting a new vendor, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of times what we do as well is we work with our underwriters. A lot of the title insurers have vetted a lot of these vendors, so they've taken a lot of the legwork out of this. And then I work with the vendor directly and make certain that we have a direct contractual relationship with the vendor to protect money. What if bad things happen? Do we have proper indemnity provisions in place? Do they have proper insurance in place? But we really start a lot with working with our title insurers and our other colleagues in our local land title associations to identify companies that have a good reputation that we should work with.
Good point on that. If you're looking for a particular vendor and you're using your local person for this, those questions are going to be very helpful for you. If you're using a trusted vendor, elite provider, or somebody that Alta's that they're very active in Alta, they understand, they show up at the best practices conferences we do. They're probably on right now. That probably gives you a little more comfort level that they know your pain and they know what to deal with when being your vendor. But if you're using a complete third party who doesn't know title from tile, then this new checklist on what you should ask them might be very, very helpful for you.
Is there a specific question that jumps out to you, Craig, that a title agent should be asking their tech providers today that they probably weren't asking 5 years ago?
Man, it's so complicated now. I mean, we're fortunate enough to be able to have an on-site, on-staff IT department, and it's impossible for me to keep up with all the changes. I would tell you this: there's 3 things in my life that I won't skimp on when it comes to spending money: doctors, lawyers, and IT people. So maybe I should throw insurance in there too. We're an insurance agent's dream. What's the most insurance we can have to protect Nightberry? We'll pay for it. We don't know. We don't understand all the threats that could be coming. So I would say on the IT, just you want to stay up on everything possible. I don't know many people that still use their in-house data closet for their servers. So much of that has gone to the cloud, which brings a whole another set of questions. Talk to your soft pros, whoever your title or your title production software is. Ask them questions on how we can keep the data safe while we possess it. I don't know. There's not a single question I can think of. There's a billion questions I can think of.
Yeah. Sherry, when you were walking through the boot camps, and the different in each pillar, and we're going to have the experts of the experts, talking, digging into them. Is there one or two pillars, if the title agent is feeling overwhelmed on starting, is there one or two that they should tackle first? Is it pillar 2 or pillar 3?
Well, I like low-hanging fruit. Licensing,
Okay.
really kind of easy to get that done. Are you licensed? Yes, no. Is your staff licensed? Yes, no. Then pillar number 5, do I issue policies? Yes, no. These are things that are the low-hanging fruit. And if you're not ready for the WISP and talking about escrows, actually, I mean, and then really let's talk about the money. Number 2 is important. Talk to your banks and what do you have in place to make certain that you're checking your accounts on a daily basis to make sure that money doesn't leave them. So I think 2 is highly important.
And you don't have to have it all done perfectly to release any type of your internal assessment. We've released our internal assessment that says, hey, we're great on these 5. These 2 we need to fix. There's a couple tweaks. We're putting in a new thing. We're training a new people. We're getting new insurance. Whatever the thing is, we put in the remediation section and send it. And our customers, lenders kind of like it. I don't know. I think some of my lenders like it more when there's a little hairier, right? When if I just send them, hey, we're amazing, here it is. Or, hey, we're amazing, but we need to get better in this section. And then 6 months later, we tell them what we're doing still to get better in that section. I think they really trust and they like that. So you can release.
Nobody's perfect. And the lender, if you said, I do everything perfect, I don't believe you. If you say, I could improve a little bit, and here's where I could tweak, they're going to believe that's more credible.
So even if you just do part of the best practices and tell your customers you're working on the rest, this isn't something you're going to do in a week. This is a longer process, and there's nothing wrong with that. Getting some done and saying in your self-assessment that you're working on the rest, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and it's not a one-time project. This is continuous operational discipline, right?
Yeah. It's not finish it and you're done. It's finish it and when's the next thing you have to tweak, and just keep your staff up to speed.
Yeah. All right, we got time for a couple more questions. One is maybe taking the underwriters to task a little bit. Sorry, any underwriters on there, but we're asking the question from the agency perspective. You guys mentioned reaching out to your underwriters for recommendations. Do the underwriters take on any responsibility? This is a question from Lisa. So thank you, Lisa, for the question. Do insurers take responsibility for that recommendation, as their insurance coverage may exclude or exempt liability on fraud, for example?
I don't think they pick up any additional, but they certainly would be. It wouldn't behoove the underwriters to say, use this company that's going to steal your money and steal your information. They certainly want to align as a partner with you, but that doesn't mean that you can shift that liability over to them to actually vet. It just gives you a leg up. Tell me a little bit more, underwriter. Have you been comfortable? Are you comfortable? What type of vetting you did? And they want to work with you. You're their agent. They want to keep that money safe.
Every single underwriter has someone or some people that will help any of us agents with any part of best practices. Why? They want you to be better if you're their agent. And 2, you can pick whichever underwriter you're going to write that next file on. And if they're going to be grateful enough to help you be better, maybe you'll consider them. So I think it's a win-win all around. And like Jerry said, they're not going to refer you to dingbats.
Right. All right. Let's wrap up with one more question. And Craig, it kind of ties into the slide that talked about why implement best practices. And it was the last one. It said it was your hidden gem. So the question is kind of, many title agents view the best practices as an exercise, as a compliance exercise. But how should they think about best practices as a fraud prevention and business protection tool?
Well, I mean, if you just follow what we've written, and we've stay on top of all the fraud. I mean, we're giving you the roadmap to protect your agency, to protect your buyers and sellers and the money you're holding. So where I thought you were going to go with that question, and I've always been told if you don't like the question that someone asked you, just answer some other question.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What I thought you were going to say is the best practices is a regulatory thing and a protection thing. Also, I didn't mention earlier, I use it as a marketing tool. It's an easy way for us to get in front of a customer to say, hey, we have some new stuff that we've been working on to protect your buyer or seller or borrower's money or data. We want a few minutes to tell you what we're doing to protect it, because I think you should know, Mr. Realtor, Mrs. Lender, what we're doing so you can feel comfortable when you refer business to us. And could I come in for 10 minutes? Or if not, can I email you our packet? And it's beautifully written. We're amazing. And here's the best practices stuff that we've done. So I use it as a marketing tool. First, it was like 2012 was like, I want to keep this lender refi business coming. I better have that. Now I don't even bother. It's a very small piece of the puzzle of why we do best practices of lender compliance. It's still there, but it's the bigger part is to keep our operation running better. And then there is a good part of it to help us market, help us open the doors. Lawyers and lenders love listening to this stuff. If you did an annual changes in the title industry, here's what we're up against, and here's how we're battling it through best practices, you'll get in easy.
All right, great explanation. Sherry, one last question from Deb, and we'll wrap it up. Question about self-assessment. How often should they be doing this?
We do it at least annually, because every time we have best practices updated, well, I need to self-assess for Alta 4.0, 4.1, 4.2. And it's a good reminder because the world is changing, our technology is changing, and then we just touch base, we sit down with all of the different people in our company that handles the different pillars and say, anything else we need to address.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for the conversation on, where we've been, where we're going, where we're at, and the upcoming best practices boot camps that are going to really dig into each of the pillars. As Craig and Sherry mentioned, the board's going to be reviewing the recommended updates. We'll be having some education, outreach later half of this year. So keep an eye out on communications from Alta. If you have any other questions, send them to Alta. We'll get them to Sherry and Craig, or get them answered by the task force. As I mentioned earlier, you'll get an email tomorrow with a link to download a copy of today's presentation and a link to the recording. Need to thank Old Republic once again for sponsoring today's webinar. And that will bring us to the conclusion of today's presentation. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.